Hello everyone, and in this build it is going to be a sword and shield build. This one is not going to be supporty. This is a almost pure offensive set. This is so you maximize your damage, since the sword and shield's damage is so low in comparison to most weapons in this game. For the charm, we have the Master's Charm 5, but you could pivot some things around to fit in a handicraft jewel if you really want to, and get the sharpness up into purple just a little bit, as you can see right there. You'd lose about half of your crit chance, but you would gain more consistent damage through the purple sharpness and the higher white sharpness. Oh, whoops, excuse me. For the mantles, as always, they are completely optional. You can choose whatever you want and pivot around what you need and or want. For the helmet, we have the Rim Guard Helm B, which is regular Velkhana's helmet. We mostly have this for the slots and Velkhana Divinity because with Sword and Shield, I find it better to go for an elemental build as opposed to a non-elemental build. But you could choose to do a non-elemental one if you really wanted. The sword that I'm using is Silverathalos sword, but you can fit whatever elemental sword and shield you want. It is completely optional, as always. For the chest piece, we have the Frostfang Male B, which is Frostfang Barioth's chest piece. We have this for the attack boost, though the punishing draw, as always, is never hurtful, which allows you to get a little bit of KO damage on your sheath attack moves. And with the sword and shield having a very, very fast sheath animation, you could probably get this off quite a bit when you hit the monster's face. For the gloves, we are using the Rimguard Vambrace's Y, which is Arch-Tempered Velkhana. We mostly have this to get the critical element from Velkhana Divinity, but the recovery up and the ice attack are always good to have, especially if you are using a ice element weapon. For the waist, we have the Ruinous Coil B, which is Ruiner Nergigante's waist. We have this for the attack boost. The earplugs aren't necessary if you have another waist that also gives you attack or something else that you'd prefer. By all means, you could probably go for it. The only thing we really want this thing for is the attack boost and the slots. The earplugs isn't necessary. For the legs, we have Young Garuga Greaves B. This is for the critical eye, as well as those really good decoration slots. For the decorations themselves, again, as always, as I like to do in my builds, if your weapon that you're choosing has a slot, I make it a pivot piece so you could put whatever you want in here and it won't hurt or really help the build too much. You could go for a footing jewel, you could go for a critical draw, you could go for throttle, you could go for a mighty jewel even, since sword and shield doesn't use too much stamina unless you are running around a lot. You could probably do a guardian, although I don't recommend blocking with the sword and shield unless you absolutely have to. For the first decoration in this build, we go for a grinder and attack. Since sword and shield is a relatively fast hitting weapon, you might go through sharpness pretty quickly. So grinder is always nice to have for when you need to sharpen in the middle of a hunt while you're fighting them, so you sharpen that much faster. And then obviously we are going for this jewel mostly for the attack boost to max it out. This jewel is a critical boost jewel, so your crits do 30% more damage, and since our crit rate is 65%, we're going to be critting more often than not if the luck is so inclined in our favor. The next jewel is a Iron Wall and Attack Boost jewel. We're mostly doing this for the attack boost, but since the Sword and Shield has a shield, if you ever feel like you need to block, this just helps that little tiny bit. The next jewel is a Protective Polish, which when you sharpen, your sharpness will not go down for about a minute or so. And because the Sword and Shield hits quite often, and combined with the grinder, if you are sharpening in the middle of a fight, this just makes it a little bit more useful. For this one, this is a pivot jewel. You could put whatever elemental jewel you want in here. I went with Blaze in this instance because the sword and shield that I have equipped is the Rathalos sword and shield, which does fire elemental damage. But if you're using a thunder one, you could put in thunder attack. If you're using a water one, you could put in stream. You don't really need points into ice attack because the gloves give you it right off the bat. So if you're using an ice attack weapon, you could put in whatever you want here, which again is another pivot piece, which is always nice to have. This jewel is for handicraft because not many level 3 decoration slots are worth using other than handicraft and maybe like a brace jewel, but I always use my level 3 decoration slots for my one and only handicraft jewel because having that much more sharpness is always good. This one is for slider and handicraft. As you can probably guess, we're mostly using this one for the handicraft, but getting 30% extra affinity when we slide down something is never a bad thing. This one is for a fire attack boost jewel. Again, I have this one equipped because I am using a fire elemental weapon, but if you are using any other elemental weapon, you could swap it out for whatever you wanted here, as well as because we have the +2 elemental jewel here, you could swap this out for another grinder or maybe the tiny defense boost or maybe a resistor or something, so I would consider this jewel another pivot piece. For this one, we are doing tremor resistance and health boost. The decorations here are more of a comfort pick for me in the footing jewel, as I like 1 point into tremor resistance to nullify most tremors that monsters or the environment throws at you. The health boost is nice and it's a good addition. You could put whatever you wanted in here, as this is another pivot piece, so do with that what you will. This jewel is for the 1 point in agitator. I would also consider this jewel a pivot piece to be whatever you really wanted. I just put challenger in here, so when the monster is angry at me, we get +8 attack, or sorry, excuse me, +4 attack and an extra 5% affinity, which brings our 65%. Sorry, my cat was clawing at the door, which brings our affinity from 65 to 75 or to 70% when the monster is angry. And then lastly, the last jewel I would consider that is essential to this build is Weakness Exploit, which when you tenderize a spot on the monster or you hit a weak spot on the monster, you get an extra 10 and or 15% affinity on the monster, which is always nice to have, which gives us an extra, or which would bump this up to 70 to 75%, and mix that with the Challenger Jewel if they are angry, which bumps it up to 80 to 75. And as always, the mantle jewels that you equip are purely optional to whatever you like and or desire. I hope this build serves you all well, as well as it has served me. I hope you have a wonderful day, evening, or night, and I will see you all in the next one. Goodbye.